week, and I'm so excited. We have with us our amazing motivational mastery mentor, Akila Davis, is with us. Yay! And she's going to be talking about the growth clusters. That's the next cluster in the series, so I'm really excited. Welcome, Akila. It's so wonderful to see you.
Thank you very, very much, Marie. It's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to see you too.
So I'm excited. You're going to teach us a little bit about the growth clusters today. We did the relationship clusters last week. So this week we're going for growth.
Yes, we are. And one of the reasons I'm going for it's because it is very, very different from the growth cluster. And I to go to both ends of the spectrum, because of course we have three. We have the relationship, the achievement, and the growth. And again, I'm going to say there's no good or bad motivation lever, and there's no good or bad cluster. It's just a combination of who we are that counts. But if what we call the growth clusters is usually denoted as blue. So if you're a true blue, and by what I mean when I say true blue, it's all of your top three are blue. So it would be creator, spirit, and searcher.
That's
And
me.
some people have all of that. And
Yep.
some people, again, like I said, will have a mixture of green, red, and blue. But what we're talking about today is the true blue. Now, it is a cluster that denotes self growth. And the higher it is, the higher our desire for self growth, it has a real impact on how we show up in the world. For some people, what happens is you are a high growth. And because you're a high growth, what that means is you're somebody who wants to be the best you could be. You're a visionary. You've got a vision of your future. If you are the head of a company, your company's future, and you have a plan to get there. But very often, if you see an opportunity that you think is going to get you there faster, you will make a snap decision to do that. And from the outside, what people are seeing is you are making a pivot very quickly, and they don't understand why. Because the growth cluster is not very good at explaining to people what they're doing and why they're doing it. Because they like the bottom line, they communicate in the bottom line. So here's what we've decided to do without going through why. And what you're going to do now. So on an individual, quite often they are seen as chasing the shiny object syndrome. Okay, because they are moving
Mm-hmm.
so fast. It is, like I said, they want to be the best they can be. They are risk friendly. They are change friendly. As a matter of fact, they don't wait for change. In this cluster, the growth cluster, they tend to create change in their lives. Um, they, as I said, tend to communicate in the bottom line. So if somebody does that to you, if they're communicating in the bottom line, go, whoa, can I have some of the details? How did you get to that decision? What's the factors? Because they make decisions so quickly, they're very decisive people. And because they make decisions so quickly, you do have a tendency to miss some things. So if you are somebody who is high growth, it is always good to have somebody who is in the relationship cluster or the achievement cluster to bounce ideas off of. And the relationship cluster can be a challenge because remember, they are not change friendly. They are not risk friendly. And they like to have information to make decisions. I'll give you an example. I'm a high growth, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And my husband is more in the achievement towards relationship. And the first time I got into business, and he would ask me questions that I didn't have an answer to. And I would get annoyed. I didn't know myself at the time. I'd get annoyed. I said, don't worry about that. We'll deal with that when we come to it. Over the years, I have learned that if I cannot answer his questions, I don't know enough to go with this decision. Yeah. So that balance is extremely important to have
Yeah.
somebody to bounce things off of, because they see things from a different point of view. And that's why in any team, it's good to have the different motivators, because each one of them brings something to the team, a different point of view. And each one of them should be considered and talked about so that you are making the best possible decisions. Okay.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
really good point.
it
It
To me,
really
it's
is.
one of the key points. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm in that
So
same boat because I'm a high growth, as you know.
yeah.
But I have a lot of people on my team that are relationship, because my relationship cluster is my lowest cluster. But I've worked over the years of just having self-awareness to realize that about myself. And so I work really hard to make sure that I'm cognizant of that, and I answer things fully, because I do make decisions quickly, and I have the ability to change really quickly because I'm processing quickly in my brain, but I know that I need to slow down and explain.
And the growth cluster is the most resilient cluster, because when they make a mistake, they don't ruminate over it like the relationship cluster would do. And I'll come back to that for a moment. They would say, okay, I've just learned one more way not to do this. And they move on, and they have.
Yeah.
And they just move on. So very resilient. Whereas on the relationship cluster would ruminate over that and goes, I didn't have enough. And it makes them just a little bit more change or risk resistant, unless they have somebody to talk to about it and they go through the same process that the growth cluster would, looking at other point of views and coming, you know what, that was the best decision I made at the time. Now we can move on. Now, so one of the other things, like when it comes to, I wanted to go back to something that you just said about your relationship cluster is your lowest cluster.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say all that means is that, and you know this, but I want to make sure other people understand this. If your relationship cluster is low, it may be your lowest, but it doesn't mean you are not good at relationships.
Right.
It just means that when you're making a decision, it's part of our decision-making process, the way the clusters work. Your big question that's going to be in your mind is this going to help me achieve what I want to achieve? And if the answer is yes, like that's your big vision. If the
Mm-hmm.
answer is yes, then you go down to your achievement cluster and you're saying, is this going to help me reach my goals? Because they're two different things, vision and goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is yes, then you will go down and say, how will it impact the people around me? Or will it impact the people around me negatively? And if the answer for that is no, you will go ahead with it. If it's yes, and I know your relationship is your lowest, but it is not as low as some people, you still have a very good relationship cluster.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is when you come to that decision, you will make provisions for the people who would be impacted to be taken care of while you're off doing what you need to do to get to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for the growth cluster, one of the things that I think is truly important, and I know it's true of me, is that I need a plan and a path. I need to know where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. And if I start to feel lost, it means I've stepped off my path. So I just have to go back to it. And sometimes that path needs to change. Set a better idea or a better tool or whatever, how we do it. And then we will go there. So it's really interesting how it impacts our entire lives, the clusters.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't realize it. And like one of the things for people who are high growth, quite often relationship is their last, is their lowest.
Mhm.
And sometimes what that means, I remember speaking to one CEO, and I said to him, when I was explaining this to him, I said, between your your growth cluster and your achievement cluster, that's taking up 80% of your mental energy. There's only 20% left for relationships. And he goes, oh, so that's why I've been divorced twice.
Oh. Talk about a hit of self-awareness there.
Yes. So the idea is once you're aware of that and your family is important, remember, these behaviors are unconscious. Once you
Mhm.
become conscious of it, you can say to yourself, my wife, my family, my whoever it is that's important to you,
Mhm.
I want to make time for them. And
Yeah.
that's when you have to do things like schedule sacred time with those people so you can keep those relationships strong. And when you do that for the people in your life, if something comes up that you can't make, um, something that you promised, they understand because you've done it. You've kept your promise as absolutely must as you can.
Mhm.
So it becomes a give and take.
A give and take. So now that we've kind of had this overview of the cluster, I'd love to dive a little bit into what does it mean to be a searcher, a seeker, a creator, which is what's inside of that cluster. So
Okay,
if you
you want
could
to go
give
to the
us,
motivational levers.
yeah, yeah, give us a little bit more about what does that mean? Like if I'm
Okay.
high, if I'm a high spirit, what does that actually mean?
Well, a high spirit means that you are somebody who loves freedom. And by freedom, it's freedom on different dimensions. One, you do not like to be tied down by paperwork. Okay, neither do I. Once I started my business, and once I realized that that was something that was important to me, my first order of business was to make enough money to hire an assistant who could do all my paperwork. You know? So you you don't like to do paperwork. You don't like things that are you don't like compliance unless it makes sense to you. If it's
Mhm.
just a CYA, you would rebel. You want to do what's best for your people. Okay. And in every way that's possible.
I'm
Yeah, I see
laughing
a big
because
smile.
I'm laughing because that's like really true. Like I do not like conformity or compliance for conformity or compliance sake. There has to be purpose, so that's why I'm laughing. Like that's really funny. It's true.
Yep. So, and that's a good point. If you're hiring somebody for a compliant position, if you know that they have a high spirit, you discuss it with them. At work, you have to be compliant. This is important. If you don't think you can do that, maybe this is not the right job for you.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
did work in compliance once
Anyway,
upon a time too.
oh, as a financial advisor,
Right. It's
compliance was
compliance.
a big
Yeah.
thing. And I have to
Yeah.
admit,
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons I left because it was getting to the point where there was a lot of CYA
Hmm.
and I didn't feel it served the client's best interest.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's one of those things. The other one is you don't like if you are in a job where you have appointments, you do not like to have so many appointments that you don't have time to think. You don't that there's no flexibility in your day. So that is important because the spirit is a very I wouldn't call them necessarily introverts, but they are the people who want they think deep thoughts. They process information in a way that other people don't. So when you look at that, they need time to do that. Uh, they tend to prefer their own company or a very small group of close friends.
Hmm.
It's why people in the a friend in the relationship cluster, there is some potential tension there. because they love being with people. They're friendly. As a matter of fact, a very high spirit with a low friend, a very low friend, tends to be seen as somebody who is standoffish. And usually in social situations, you will find them talking about work. It's what they're most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing they don't like is to not have the freedom to do what they want to do because they can't afford it. So they don't like to be tightly strapped down by money. So as you can see, they don't like anything that ties them down. And there's the crux of this.
Yeah.
There's the crux of this.
Yeah. We have somebody on LinkedIn, because I can't see who it is in the comments. They said that their biggest cluster, that's their biggest cluster. And they said, I can be very rigid about rules and compliance if they make sense and exist for a good reason. Otherwise,
That is exactly it. I've said if it makes sense a couple of times.
Yeah, and they did that in caps, so that was
Yeah.
like a shout out. Like, it has to make sense. That's funny.
Yeah. Yep. And another thing about the spirit cluster, and this is why 99% of successful entrepreneurs fall into this cluster, is they believe in what they're doing or they won't do it. And if they believe in what they're doing, then no amount of logical arguments from others will change their mind until they don't believe anymore. Something has to happen to make them not believe in it before they will abandon their ideas.
So it's a very strong sense of belief that guides that particular segment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is part of the spirit.
The spirit.
Then there's the creator.
Yeah, that was my next question.
The creator is all about new, cutting edge. They like to be at the forefront of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And a high creator is, when I say a high creator, if you're in 30 or above, a high creator is more of what I call a synthesizer. Because what they do is they will take ideas. They're reading the newspaper, and then the next day they're watching a movie, and something about those two come together in their mind, and they can come up with a totally new idea, way of thinking about something. It is absolutely amazing. I think when you talk about out of the box, there is no one more out of the box than creators.
Creator.
A lot of people.
Get out of my head, Akilah. Get out of my head.
A lot of people, when they think of creators, they think of artists, painters, any of those things that we think of creativity. But there's much more to it. To me, one of the greatest creators of the last century was Einstein. Way of looking at things very differently, coming up with new ideas. And in every single field, if we didn't have creators, we wouldn't have innovation.
That's a really true statement. Yeah. Yeah.
So creators can belong anywhere. It doesn't pigeonhole you into something specific. Mm-hmm. So, and that's one of the things I love about this. It doesn't say you will be a good this. It says, here's your beliefs and talents and motivation. You will be great in an area where you are being creative. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things I see when I do motivational map surveys for teams and companies is quite often people who are great at their jobs, their creator is low. Mm-hmm. It means that they are bored. They have reached their level of creativity and now you're bored. And that's why a lot of people leave their jobs.
So that's interesting, because that boredom really, it sounds like it's really speaking to a lack of their ability to use their creativity. Yeah. And so they're getting demotivated because they're not able to be creative.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I seriously suggest that companies, when they redo these surveys, they look at that and they go, oh, if this is something, what would you like to do next? What area would you like to learn about in the company? And you can cross train people, retain the knowledge in the company and some of your best people. Yeah. But if you don't know that people are bored, how are you going to help them? Yeah. Or if you don't know that people are feeling so tied down by working in the office 9 to 5, even when they don't feel like it, how are they going to be putting forward their best work and being very, very productive?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so the next one then is the searcher.
Searcher.
Yeah.
Yes. The searcher is somebody who wants to do meaningful work. And the meaningful work is what is meaningful to them. Some people, they want to save the world. Some people, they want to explore space. Some people, you know, I always think of that story about JFK touring NASA and spoke to a janitor and said, "What do you do here?" And he said, "We're putting a man in space." He felt part of that group, that he was integrated in that group and he was doing something important. Yeah. So for me, again, I had a housekeeper and I had her do the motivational map. And her top motivator was a searcher, and she was very satisfied with it. So I asked her about it because people tend to think that, oh, if I'm a searcher, I have to be doing something that is tremendously important. No. I asked her about it, and she said, "You know what, Akila? When you come home in the evening to a clean house and you can relax with your family, and I know that I made that possible, it makes my day worth it."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really someone that's tied to purpose. And that kind of makes me think a lot of times corporations are always talking about how they want people to be tied to the purpose of the organization. And so if they actually were to use motivational maps, one, they would recognize that for people who have a high searcher, absolutely they need to be tied to the purpose of the company. But for those who don't have a high searcher, that is really about looking at what motivates them that's going to make them fulfilled, as opposed to saying everyone must be tied to the purpose of the organization.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to wrap up quickly because we're coming towards the end. Is that we all have those motivators within us. And because someone does not have a high searcher, doesn't mean that they don't care. It could be that they already feel they are serving a purpose and something else is more important to them at this point in time. Okay.
Yes.
So that is really important to know.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good tie-in, because I think it's really important for companies to recognize that, because the sort of party line is always we need to have people tied to purpose, and we don't stop to think, well, some people are tied to purpose, but that's not what's motivating them right now. There's something else. Maybe creativity is motivating them. Maybe their spirit is motivating them. Like Dominique was the one who talked about that this is her cluster, like that. Maybe that's what's motivating them, as opposed to just saying that the searcher is what should be motivating them. They might have that fulfilled, and there are other things that are motivating them.
And that is something that I think is really important, especially when we're talking about the back to the office. If you have somebody who is a high searcher, or a high spirit, they will do better work at home. They will be more productive at home if that's what they want. If you have somebody who is high friend, they need to be surrounded by other people. They need that energy. So they will be better off in the office. But again, you force a searcher into the office, they're not going to be as productive. And if you force a high friend to work from home, they're not going to be as productive. So it's important that companies know their people, understand them. Or the way I put it, hear their voice, because this is motivation. And people don't make a choice about what motivates them. We uncover motivations, not discover them or decide on what they're going to be.
Oh, I love that. That is really good. And we're going to end it on that note with saying that I will be posting the link for the form so that you can win your chance to get a motivational map and a debrief from this amazing woman, Akila Davis, who is just fantastic. And then we will have a practitioner next week that's going to talk to us about how they're using motivational maps in their business. I want to thank you, Akila, for taking the time to really go through the growth cluster. And then we will probably in a couple of weeks, we'll do the last cluster, which is the achievement cluster. But we have a person coming on next week that's going to tell us about how she uses motivational maps in her practice. Thank you, everyone, for the time today. It was wonderful seeing you.
Bye-bye.
And have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.
Bye. And thank you, Marie.